everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Erin Hanusa. I'm the Director of Communications and Partnerships at NCCD. I'm so pleased to be here with Isadora Kosofsky today. We started out today with a wonderful plenary session where we heard from Kathy Park and Dr. William Bell about the individual looks that we can all take at how we approach the work that we do in systems and with systems. And right now, we're going to have another opportunity to take a look at the work of systems from a different angle. I hope that all of you had a chance to look at our photography exhibit near the registration table. Those photographs are the work of Isadora Kosofsky, who's joining us today for a conversation about her photography. And those pictures come from two different series, Vinnie and David, The Life and Incarceration of a Family, and Parent-Child Visits. Those are two of a number of series that Ms. Kosofsky has done around individuals in systems. And I would urge you to visit her website to check out all of them. They're really worth exploring. We're also grateful to Ms. Kosofsky for donating the prints that are on display near the table in the front. A little bit about Ms. Kosofsky's background. She's a documentary photographer based in Los Angeles. She received the Magenta Foundation's Flash Forward Award in 2015 and the 2012 Inga Marath Award from the Magnum Foundation. Her series, Vinnie and David, which we'll discuss today, took second place in the 2016 International Academic Forum Documentary Photography Competition. Ms. Kosofsky's work has been honored by the LEAD Awards and the Ian Perry Scholarship and featured in many books and media outlets. Please help me welcome Isadora Kosofsky. Thank you so much for being here today, Ms. Kosofsky. I'd like to start by just hearing a little bit about what a documentary photographer does and the purpose behind your work.
A documentary photographer is basically a visual anthropologist, but the work that a documentary photographer does tends to end up in media outlets, tends to end up in publication form and in journalistic settings. So the term documentary photographer is very much interchangeable with photojournalist. But documentary photography tends to be documenting a situation, a story, a community over a long period of time. So taking an immersive approach to a subject matter and documenting an individual or community over a period of time to reveal a story of social resonance.
And how did you come to be interested in documentary photography and get a start in it?
I started photographing when I was 14, shortly after my grandmother passed away. I was incredibly lonely because she was very much a third parent to me, and when I lost her, it was very profound. And I felt disconnected from people in my age group at the time, and I was very much looking for creative catharsis. And I was in a black and white development class in school, and I had a teacher who encouraged the work that I was doing, and I knew that I had to seek out subjects. So I was very much drawn to elderly communities who reminded me of my grandma, and I spent a lot of time in retirement settings doing portraiture and finding stories that moved me in those surroundings and documenting those.
And who were your first subjects?
My first subjects were predominantly retired people, and I focused on retirement and romance for a period of time. I spent some years photographing people in hospice care, and then when I was about 15, I became interested in the juvenile justice system, which has led me to about 7 years of photographing in the criminal justice system.
And what spurred your interest in that system?
Initially, it was because the first boy I kissed got arrested, and
that must have been some kiss.
Really, it was because I had, of course, that experience with somebody that I essentially fell in love with, who was then taken into custody, and I lost contact with him. I think it was also because of our group of friends and their interaction with the juvenile justice system. Many of them were on probation or had just come back from summer boot camp settings. So I was around young people with struggles related to the juvenile justice system, and I was drawn to them because we've all shared similar experiences in our family of origin. And I was very much interested, once I lost many of those friends because they went on to being incarcerated for long periods of time, I was very much interested in pursuing, kind of as any artist is, what I feel a personal connection to. And I wanted to know, why is it that I feel such anger and frustration that I've lost these friends, and how do I try and understand them, and then in turn understand why I feel such a connection to them.
So you're using it as a vehicle for exploring your own emotions, not simply to humanize people in the system or offer a perspective on them.
Right. I mean, I think that when you dedicate a certain amount of years to a story, you have to feel an empathetic connection to that story. I don't think a social imperative, of course, for me, it's been enough to jumpstart projects, but you have to feel, with that sense of needing to bring a story to social consciousness, the sense that that story truly matters for you as a human being, not just for purposes outside of yourself.
Well, let's take a look at some of your work. The first series that we're going to look at today is Vinny and David, The Life and Incarceration of a Family. We have some of those images on display, but you'll see more of them here, and they're more on the website. Can you just set this up a little bit, some of the people and relationships that people are going to see in this series?
So I met Vinny when he was incarcerated in 2012. He was 13. He was being held at the Juvenile Detention Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I was photographing for about a month. I was 18 at the time and was going from one juvenile detention center after another across the United States. And I was doing portraits of youth, and I felt that that just wasn't enough. Photographing the young people in that setting really didn't convey their identities as I wanted to in the humanistic framework that I operate in. So when I met Vinny, I saw him getting his mugshot taken. I felt this immediate connection to him. I ended up sitting with him the day that he entered the facility, and I learned that he was there for stabbing the man who was assaulting his mother. And he repeatedly that day told me about his mom and about his brother, and what I heard about his brother was so intriguing, and this intense love that he felt for his brother made me really want to meet him. And this is an older brother who was 18 at the time, who was out of the adult system, in and out of the jail system in Albuquerque at the time, and was very active in drug dealing. And Vinny saw David as this father figure. And when I met David about a month later, I knew that I had to do a project in tandem and document both of the brothers' trajectories through the criminal justice system, and also in their family and what their family system looks like. And I documented their two youngest siblings, Michael and Alicia, as well as David's father and Vinny's father, their mother, Eve, and David's fiancée, Felicia, and their child, Lillian. And I have been documenting this family for over 5 years. The project is ongoing, and it's indefinite.
Great. Let's take a look. So, as you've mentioned, this is a family who's been involved with many systems. They've had foster care involvement, juvenile justice, the adult correction system. What have you observed about the needs that are present in the members of the family, and how these systems that they've come into contact with have addressed or been unable to address those needs?
Well, I would say that family violence has been one of the major issues for this particular family, and there hasn't been in their community a lot of opportunity for them to seek counseling together. And the only time that the brothers have had an opportunity to have psychological care has been in the facilities, in the carceral settings that they've ended up in. Like, for example, with David, he was in and out of jail, and the only time that he had an opportunity to detox from methamphetamine was in the jail setting. And I think that another issue that came up for them as well was while David was in and out of the pretrial system, he was repeatedly returning to jail, not for reoffending in the criminal sense, but for offending with drug use. So I think one of the biggest obstacles for progression for the family has been recovering from an inability to recover from the family violence that they've suffered for many years. And also the toll that addiction has had on them, and just this system in New Mexico, unfortunately, not being able to help every individual in the family. I also really feel that because every single member of this family unit is involved in some form of criminal behavior, it's very hard for David and Vinny to come back into the family setting and feel like it's a safe space where there can be personal growth when mother and father are engaging in that kind of behavior. So the culture of loss that permeates this family is, I've seen over the past 5 years, almost too great for what the system can accommodate at this time.
Some of these photographs are so intimate, and they really reveal something so ethereal about the nature of the relationships between these different family members. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you get that kind of access to be present in those moments and capture them, without interrupting or being in the way of these really close interactions.
Well, I think that it's been different building intimacy with each member of the family. With Vinny, our bond was immediate because he had never had the experience of telling anybody his story. So when he was able to confide in me, we had somewhat of an immediate connection. It took over a year for David to even allow me to photograph him. He would leave when I came into their household. He would avoid my phone calls. He was not willing to participate and didn't trust my presence for quite a long period of time. But because I believed in this family so much, I pursued them even when I felt like the project wasn't moving forward. In terms of building intimacy with somebody like David, who was the most challenging person to work with, is this continual, this showing that I was committed to the family and the story was really the only way for me to gain access, and repeatedly returning to visit them, writing him when he was in jail, making myself available by phone for him to call me, and showing that I was genuine and unauthentic about my motives. And that really could only happen over a period of time. And in the case with David, it was over a year for me to show him that I wasn't a threat to their family dynamic.
So now that you have those relationships built with David and other members of the family, have you talked with them and heard their impressions of what it feels like to be photographed and have their lives and their joys and their struggles documented in this way and shared with the world?
I have had that opportunity. There was an article that ran a few months ago on medium.com where I was given the opportunity to interview David specifically about his experience of being photographed over the past 5 years. And I was actually surprised by his responses. He has trouble expressing his emotions, and I was shocked by the level of verbal vulnerability that he showed in that interview. And he said that he feels and it moves me now to talk about it. He says that he feels privileged that his family has been documented in this way. So I walked into their lives feeling like a burden, and 5 years later, they assign an incredible value on the documentation that I've done of their lives. And I think what has brought all of us together is the sense that I have been present for so much vulnerability and so much turmoil and so much struggle, and sharing in those intimate moments creates an incomparable bond. So being photographed over a period of time, though initially uncomfortable for many of them, has actually heightened self-worth, which is something that I've seen repeatedly also in other communities that I've worked with, is this sense that my story matters. I didn't think my story matters. I feel like maybe I don't matter to the world, but somebody thinks that my story is of value. And I think that this family has very much taken that from these photos.
Wonderful. Well, that brings us to the second series, and we can talk about this in a bit of a different context. Let's look at some images from parent-child visits. This is a series that is quite different in some ways in terms of the duration of time that you're spending with your subjects. Can you talk a little bit about how you got involved in this and the program that puts you in touch with the subjects?
Well, I was very much drawn, after working for a number of years with Vinny and David's family, to do something specifically about parental incarceration because of the strained relationship I witnessed between David and his daughter because of his repeated incarceration. And I was also very much drawn to the notion of visitation, because David and his family very rarely were able to see each other. And it just so happened that around the time when I was spending months photographing in the prison system for various independent projects and publications, that I got an Instagram follower from children of inmates. And that's actually how I found the organization, was that they followed me on Instagram. And I looked into the organization, as I'm always very passionate and curious to work with not-for-profits, because I feel that that's where true change on a broader level can occur, is when photojournalists and not-for-profits and policymakers can come together to create narrative. So when I found out about Children of Inmates and the incredible work that they do in Florida, and we have one of their representatives here today, Sam at the front, it was this opportunity for me to look at intimacy between families in a context that tends to deny intimacy between families. So these visits are exceptional. They allow physical contact between parent and child. There are bonding activities, games are played, there's an immense amount of laughter, there's music played, there's singing, there's the ability to have a meal with your parent, and all of these details struck me as an incredible opportunity to explore intimacy and love and these human relations in a context that's typically reserved regarding those subjects.
When you photograph the families who are having these visits, do you have much of an opportunity to interact with them one-on-one, or are you primarily sort of on the sidelines just observing? What's the process like that it sounds different, you know, than working with Vinny and David's family?
It's incredibly different, and I think that I love challenges, and this project has very much been a challenge because Vinny and David has been a project over a period of years with one family. This project is wholly in contrast because it's about many different families, and I have to integrate myself very quickly. Whereas with Vinny and David, I could spend hours trying to become invisible in their motel room or in their apartment or in a park. With this, I have to make the families comfortable with me within a few hours. And really that has occurred with thankfully having the opportunity, because of children of inmates, to ride the bus with the families to the facilities. Sometimes that's a 5-hour drive, and being able to interface with the mothers, or in the cases of when we're going to female facilities, the fathers or caretakers of these children, and establishing a conversation before entering the facility, so that once we are in there, I can take the stance that I do as an observer and able to shoot these intimate moments.
And on those bus rides where you're talking with family members, what have you learned about them?
What have I learned about them? I mean, for me, I'm really interested in essence. I feel like, my job is not to come up with a quantitative or qualitative view. I know a lot of people in this room do a superb job at that. My purpose is to allow for compassion and empathy to come across in narrative form with images. And what I really try to do when I talk to families is not only, of course, get some kind of journalistic background to their story. Where do they come from? What does their daily life look like? What is it like without this parent present? But also just know them on a human level. What do the kids like to watch at night? Or, what do they enjoy? What do they miss about their parent? Or really just sitting with them and experiencing the emotions that they feel riding on the bus. And that includes sometimes not talking at all and just observing a child nervously playing a game on his or her mother's phone. That is all crucial in making up the essence of a documentary. And that's not based in fact. That's very much based in a gut feeling of, leading you to the right people on that bus. Or not necessarily right, but in the sort of the creative sense, the people that you feel a connection to, I very much have to trust my gut in those that I speak to.
You talked about the visitation difficulties for Vinny and David's family, and in that series we saw Felicia and Lillian visiting David via video. And this is a series about face-to-face visits. Very recently, Maya Shenwar had an op-ed in the New York Times about video visitation and how painfully inadequate it felt to her when she tried to use that technology to visit her sister who was incarcerated. I'm wondering about your thoughts on that, having seen both of those modes of connecting for family members, and especially in light of what we see here, sort of, what do you think about that use of video visitation for these families?
I think that it wrongfully punishes the children, and I think that what I've learned over the years is that kind of almost a cliche to say that incarceration is a collective experience. It's not localized to a facility, and when you have an incarcerated loved one, that affects every part of life. That does not begin with getting on a bus, and it doesn't end with coming home from that visit. Those feelings continue, and they have profound effects on the children involved, and they have profound effects on the parents of even the children who are in the facility. So I think it's important to, of course, I cannot do the work that I do without the support of those who work in these facilities, those who run these facilities, policymakers, and people who make the decisions that are implemented in these contexts. And I'm indebted to the people who have believed in me over the last 5 to 7 years to allow this kind of intimate work to occur. With that being said, I think that the priority moving forward, and what I would hope with the work that I do, is a more child-focused view and the acknowledgement that, yes, we have a system that requires punishment for crimes, but is it truly a humane system if we are punishing and causing collateral damage for the people around that individual?
Thank you. We have just a couple of minutes to take a couple of questions from the audience. If you have a question for Ms. Kosofsky, could you please raise your hand and somebody will come and find you with the mic. Okay, great.
Thank you. The pictures that you select, do the families choose, or do you choose which ones you want to showcase?
I choose which images end up in the edit, or an editor at a particular publication will receive a batch of images from me, and they'll choose which images are included. All of the families receive the photographs from the project, and whenever the work is published, they're also notified so they can be part of that conversation as well.
So, but they don't have autonomy on what you show or don't show?
I show them the work. When I published Vinny and David in Time magazine, the family saw the edit before it ran, and I asked them if the project was true to their experience, and they said yes, and that gave me the green light to move forward.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Right over here.
Hi, I just wanted to say that your photographs were really, truly inspiring and amazing. I had the privilege last year of working on a project called Sentence Unseen, where a suite of photographs kind of similar was put on Alcatraz, which is the National Park Service space. And Ruth Morgan, I don't know if you know her, and Project Watt is the youth that are involved with the children of incarcerated parents. And it, as a demonstration, it has led to policy change. So the children who were, the young people who were photographed and also had their own stories, letters to their fathers, letters to their mothers. So there is a direct correlation when you can show these images and give voice to this sentence unseen, because that's really what it is for those children. You know, they've been sentenced as well. So I'm just sort of echoing the impact that these can have, and I'm glad you know who Ruth is, because she's a colleague that's done similar work.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I do know Ruth, and we're very much of the same mindset that obscuring these stories, when society obscures these stories and silences the voices of this marginalized community, we participate collectively in reenacting the trauma of incarceration on these families. So when we silence them, we are all a part of we're very much the gatekeepers to whether or not these stories are heard, and that's why I feel like it's not just photojournalists that are needed moving forward and telling these stories, but also people in various positions who are able to disseminate that work. So, thank you.
Just to give you an example, because you brought up the video thing, if a young person wants to visit their parent in jail, there was a rule, and it turned out the sheriff in San Francisco County changed it to allow a 15 or a 16-year-old to be able to go visit without, in most cases, the foster parent going with. So it was a simple thing like that would block the ability, because as you said, to do the traveling, to get the permissions, etc. But if it wasn't for those stories being told and the young people feeling empowered enough to go to the sheriff, so it does have this, policy impact. So I just wanted to give that as an example.
Thank you.
I want to also mention that tomorrow afternoon we have a workshop on voices of children of incarcerated parents. So please come to that, and also hopefully Samuel Luddington of Children of Inmates can stick around for a little bit after we wrap up if anyone has questions and would like to learn more about their programming. We do need to wrap up, so I just want to say thank you so much, Ms. Kosofsky, for being with us today. Please visit IsadoraKosofsky.com to look at more images from these series and others, and enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you.